Basics. Today we're going to be talking about project management. The learning objectives for this video are to describe 4 phases of project management, to be able to identify different project management tools that might be useful for a manager, and then apply a project management tool to one of your current projects. So let's begin with the 4 phases of project management. The 4 phases we'll be discussing focus around the planning of the project, build up to the project, implementing or executing the project, and then closing it out. Phase 1, the planning. Here's where we want to first identify the problem that you're trying to solve with the project and list out the objectives. What are the things that you need to accomplish during this entire event? You need to identify who's going to be involved. Not just those who are on your team or who will be helping you with the project, contributing resources, time, money, effort, but also who's the end user, who are your customers. Is this just a project for your teacher or for your boss, or is this a project that's going to ultimately go to the end customer? So, like for a pharmacy, will the end user be the patient? Thinking about who the final person is. While planning, you want to determine the scope and the major tasks that need to be completed to meet the deliverables for the project. And finally, you want to plan for trade-offs. When we talk about trade-offs, we're talking about the overall quality of the project as a function of the time and effort or costs that go into the project. So the amount of time you spend on it and what resources go into it, obviously as those kind of go up, you think you're delivering a much higher quality product. Well, there may be components where the quality of the product maybe you can trade off some of that because you don't have the time or the budget to deliver, a quality project that would be, the highest quality or whatever that may be. So I hope that makes sense, but really just trying to understand, in order for you to get the project done, you just have to evaluate how well you want to do and what you've got to put into it. The next phase is the build up to the project. So this is where you actually need to form your team, identify who you need on the team to get this done. Once you have your team established, you want to be able to assign who's going to be doing what role does everyone play. Then create a schedule and try to be realistic, looking at the calendar and figuring out when things need to be done, but then also think about, the people on your team are human, so give them make sure it's a realistic schedule for something for them to get done. You want them to be successful. One recommendation I also like is to hold a project kickoff. This is and it doesn't have to be super formal. Sometimes a big project, you might have a real formal kickoff meeting, but any project, I think you could have a mini kickoff meeting, and that may be bringing your team members together, having kind of that start to say, okay, we're getting going, reminding everyone whose role is what, reviewing the schedule, some of those major milestones, and kind of a rah-rah, let's get going. And last but not least, do not forget your budget. So as part of your planning and build up, you want to make sure you understand where your budget is for the project. The third phase is the implementation or execution of the project. This is putting the plan into action. Now, as you execute the project, you've got to monitor and control all processes, and that includes the budget. So you've got to keep track of things. Report your progress along the way to your team and to your boss if this is within your company. It's just really important to kind of let people know where you are, let people know where you stand. That way are we doing well, are we on track, or are we falling behind? You want to try to hold routine check-in meetings. Now, be careful here. Sometimes I see teams meet too frequently, and sometimes I feel like they don't meet at all. So, how do you find that right balance to how frequently you should check in? A lot of teams do weekly. Some operations even do daily type check-in meetings. Maybe they're just a quick standing meeting. And I love that when I see that in companies where it's not, you don't want to sit down around a table and take an hour for a meeting. Maybe it's just a very quick 15-minute, everyone stand around, everyone's in a standing position. That way they're not comfortable. You just get what you need to get done to check in and make sure everyone's on the same page, that you've gone over progress, you've reminded everyone of the roles, and then you get to work, right? You don't want to just be in meetings all day. And then last but not least, as you're going through the execution, you've got to manage through problems. So you're going to have team members drop off. You might have people leave the company. You might have new members come on that you've got to train. You may run short on resources, or some things may cost more than what you initially planned. So trying to come up with contingency plans, managing through that to make sure you still execute on your deliverables. The last phase is closing out the project. So this is really the overall evaluating the performance, seeing how well you did and what you could have done better on, trying to understand, really what did it look like at the end. You're turning in your deliverables, whatever you promised to do. So if it's a major project for a class, maybe it's turning in that project assignment. If it's for a company, maybe it's launching the product itself. Either way, you want to make sure you debrief with your team, go over whatever how everyone did. And I think what's important is that you've got to celebrate and recognize efforts. I'm sure every project has its ups and downs, and there's definitely times to criticize and critique. But in that public setting, when you get everyone together, try to recognize their efforts and celebrate that. Again, if you identify a team member that in a job that you need to maybe get rid of, or that there may be a HR situation where you're trying a poor performer that's got to be going through a performance improvement plan, handle that separately, handle that individually. Don't try not to berate or call anyone out negatively in that closeout meeting. So use the closeout as kind of like, hey guys, we finished the project, great work here and here, and try to keep things positive moving forward. Obviously, as projects when projects fail, it's important that we don't just sugarcoat it. I mean, we have to be real and honest, but even through our failures, we can learn something. So try to, again, look to see where you can celebrate. And, even when I used to manage pharmacies, there were a lot of things that I would just identify as, in the past, it may have been a very small win. It may have been something like, getting our wait time from 15 minutes to 12 minutes on average, or something like that, or whatever goal we set to do for some metric in the pharmacy. Inventory measure, the overall inventory of the pharmacy, that was one that we always had goals on. And whenever we reach those goals, take the time and celebrate and recognize the team for their efforts. Now let's shift gears and talk about project management tools. Think about some tools or software that might be out there that can help you get your project going. So the first one is kind of old school, but it works really well, the Gantt chart. So with the Gantt chart, you're going to have sort of dates and a timeline across the x-axis. So you'll see kind of like going from left to right, days or months or whatever it may be. Along the y-axis, you're going to see these individual tasks. So you might have task 1, 2, all the way to task 8 or whatever it may be. These bars represent the time, from the start date all the way to the completion date. So you get this kind of grid that shows you when a task should start and when it should be finished. And then as you look along the overall project, as you can imagine, so let's use this as an example. So we've got May 21st to June 4th, so just like a week or so. We have a chunk between May 25th and 31st where several projects are overlapping a little bit more, especially on May 27th, 29th. So that's going to be a really busy time for your team because you got multiple projects going on at once. And that's sort of the overall idea behind a Gantt chart. Think about a student, so let's say you've got a homework due, there's a group project, maybe you've got some reading assignments. Followed up, you got an exam that you need to study for, so you've got to block off some time to study, and maybe you got a second exam that's following up after that you've got to think about as well. So if you build out your Gantt chart, what's one thing we see right here in that same kind of maybe in the middle of the chart? We see 2 or 3 things that are all hitting at the same time. So then what you got to ask yourself is, well, can I get that group project maybe done on May 25th? If you get the group project done a couple days early, it'll take one less bar off of your overall workload, right? Or are those reading assignments something that plenty ahead of time or well ahead of time? Can you get those reading assignments done at a different time, so earlier or whatever? So this is just a great way for you to map out all of your major projects and then see what stacks on top of each other. Now, the Gantt chart's old school. You can build them in Microsoft Excel. You can just do it on a piece of paper if you want. There's a million different tools online. You can just go to Google and type in, free project management tool. You'll find a million different tools. I just pulled out a few that I'm familiar with, or at least have known of. I've tried Trello. So Trello's they've got some free and paid versions available. One of the challenges is if you're not logging in regularly, how useful is it? So, we'll talk about that in a second, but I've tried Trello and Basecamp for a couple projects. I got a Slack account, and then I just haven't built my team. My team's not large enough to where we really need Slack, so I've not used Slack. Microsoft Teams is another one that some organizations have invested in. Open Project is an open source software. So, if you're, and again, I think it's always good to think through open source stuff or things that may be free before you start paying for things. So definitely check out some different tools. Here's an example of Trello, and this is a free template that they have for project management. And if you if you actually go to YouTube or whatever, you can search Trello tutorial or whatever. You can pull up a bunch of tutorials about how to use Trello effectively. You can kind of see there's different people associated or tasked with different projects. There's to-do lists, there's kind of pending projects. Anyway, so just and it's got a nice easy user a nice user interface. I mean, I like pulling it up on my cell phone or iPad or any other device. It's easy to kind of pull up and easy to use. Here's an open project, and again, so this is an open source software. As you can see, you've got this nice little Gantt chart. It can get complicated quickly, but it doesn't have to be super complicated as well. So don't think you've got to blow it out and use every single feature. Just showing you another free example. So what should you use? Really think about how big is your project. Is it a something that's going to take a few hours, or is it going to take a few months or a few years? How big is your overall project? How many team members are going to be involved? If it's just a couple people, maybe you don't need a full out software or anything like that. Also, how big is your budget? Is there a budget involved? Sometimes as students, we're just doing group projects. Maybe we don't really have a budget to spend. We're just thinking about our time and effort as the main thing that we're considered from a resource standpoint. And then how good are you with technology? Don't get too crazy on the technology if you're just that's not your strength. You're not comfortable bouncing around with different software. So maybe keep it old school if technology is not your thing. So or if you have someone on the team that is really good with technology, assign them to kind of manage the inputs and everything in the software, and let them kind of lead that. And then you come log in and do your thing, but maybe you don't own that piece if you're not the tech wizard in your group. So anyway, think about a couple of those questions and think how and from that try to identify a software that might work well for you. All right, thanks again. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can email me. If you have a comment or question that's good for public discussion that's related to the topic, don't hesitate to post it to Twitter. I'm happy to kind of engage publicly too to get others involved. If you're not enrolled in the course, feel free to leave a comment below within YouTube, and any comments that might be useful for the class, I'll be sure to pass along. All right, thank you very much.